I was 35 years old when I heard my brother tell the doctor I was going to die anyway. I was paralyzed in the ICU bed, unable to open my eyes, but I could hear everything. My mother was dividing up my belongings. My sister was on the phone with my insurance company, and someone in that room had poisoned me. My name is Dexter Calloway, and this is the story of how my own family tried to kill me for money. Let me paint you a picture of who we're dealing with here. My brother Preston was 3 years older than me, the golden child who went to college and became a real estate agent. He wore designer suits he couldn't afford and leased BMWs to impress clients who rarely bought anything. Preston had that salesman smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. He'd shake your hand while calculating your net worth, and if you weren't useful to him, you'd cease to exist in his world. My mother, Dorothy, had worked as a bank teller for 30 years before retiring. She knew money, counted it, guarded it, obsessed over it. After retirement, she developed a taste for online poker that she thought nobody knew about. She wore her church clothes on Sunday and preached about family values, but I'd seen her laptop history when she asked me to fix it. Thousands gone to gambling sites. She had this way of hugging you while checking your pockets, if you know what I mean. Then there was my sister Francine, 2 years younger than me, the artist who never quite made it. She painted beautiful landscapes that nobody wanted to buy, lived in a studio apartment paid for by credit cards she couldn't afford. Francine had this nervous laugh she'd do whenever money came up in conversation. She'd been borrowing from everyone for years, always promising her next piece would sell for thousands. It never did. My father, Vernon, was different from the rest. A plumber who fixed people's problems without overcharging, who sat quietly in his recliner during family dinners, observing but rarely contributing. Dad had hands that could fix anything but never grabbed for what wasn't his. I should have paid more attention to his silence during those family gatherings. Silent people see everything. My ex-wife, Bethany, worked as a nurse at County General. We'd divorced 2 years ago, but not because of anger or betrayal. We'd simply grown apart like two trees planted too close together, each needing our own sunlight. She'd kept the house, I'd taken the apartment above my auto shop, and we shared custody of the only perfect thing we'd created together. Hazel, 8 years old, with her mother's green eyes and my stubborn streak. She loved helping me in the shop, her small hands getting dirty with engine grease, asking why engines work the way they did. She never asked for expensive toys or designer clothes like other kids. She just wanted time, attention, and occasionally chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. The shop, Calloway Auto Repair, had been in my family since my grandfather opened it in 1962. It sat on Maple Street between a bakery and a hardware store, the kind of place where people still knew your name and asked about your family. I'd taken it over when Grandpa died 5 years ago, keeping his same honest pricing and quality work. The shop did well enough. I wasn't rich, but I paid my bills, saved a little each month, and never worried about putting food on the table. That October morning started like any other. I'd gotten to the shop at 6, like always. Mrs. Henderson's old Buick needed a transmission rebuild, and I'd promised it by noon. The coffee maker gurgled in the corner, filling the shop with that familiar bitter scent that meant the day was starting. I grabbed my usual mug, the one Hazel had painted for me in art class with "World's Best Dad" in crooked letters. The coffee tasted normal, maybe a little bitter, but shop coffee always tasted like motor oil and regret. I'd drunk half the cup when the first wave hit me. Not pain, exactly, but pressure, like someone had placed a hydraulic press on my chest and was slowly cranking it down. Then my left arm went numb, that textbook symptom Bethany had described a dozen times from her emergency room shifts. I knew what was happening. My grandfather had died of a heart attack in this very shop, but he'd been 78. I was 35, ran 3 miles every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I didn't smoke. I barely drank. My last physical came back perfect, yet there I was, dropping to my knees on the oil-stained concrete, my phone somehow in my hand, managing to dial 911 before the world went dark. That's where this story really begins. Not with the heart attack itself, but with what I heard while everyone thought I was too far gone to ever wake up again. Life before that October morning was beautifully ordinary. I ran Callaway Auto Repair on Maple Street, the same shop my grandfather had opened when Kennedy was president. Every morning followed the same comfortable rhythm. I'd wake up at 5:30 in my apartment above the shop, brew coffee strong enough to strip paint, and check the appointment book for the day. By 6, I'd have the garage doors open, ready for whatever mechanical puzzle needed solving. The shop was my sanctuary. 3 bays, clean tools on pegboard walls, and the smell of motor oil that had seeped into the concrete over 60 years. I knew every wrench, every socket, every diagnostic machine. This was my world, where problems had solutions and hard work actually fixed things. Every morning at 7:15, I'd drive Hazel to school. She'd sit in the passenger seat of my old Ford pickup, her backpack between her feet, telling me about her science projects or which boy was being annoying that week. "Dad, did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" she'd said just a week before my heart attack. Maybe if people had 3 hearts, they'd love more. "Maybe they would, sweetheart," I'd replied, not knowing how soon one of my hearts would fail. The divorce from Bethany had been finalized 2 years earlier. We'd sat in the mediator's office like 2 polite strangers dividing furniture. No screaming, no accusations, just 2 people acknowledging that what we'd built together wasn't working anymore. She was dedicated to her 12-hour shifts at the hospital, saving lives and coming home exhausted. I was married to the shop, to the rhythm of engines and the satisfaction of fixed problems. We'd been living parallel lives in the same house and finally admitted it. "We make better friends than spouses," Bethany had said, and she was right. Now she'd drop Hazel off on Sunday nights. We'd chat about school events or doctor appointments, and there was more warmth between us than there'd been in our last year of marriage. My family gathered every Sunday at Mom and Dad's house, a tradition as fixed as oil changes every 3,000 miles. The house was a modest 2-story in the suburbs, the mortgage paid off years ago through Dad's steady plumbing work. Mom would cook pot roast that was always a little too dry, and we'd sit around the dining room table pretending we were closer than we really were. Preston would show up late, always on his phone with some client. "Just closing a deal," he'd say, though we all knew most of his deals fell through. He'd been struggling since the market shifted, but his pride was too big to admit it. He'd rather lease a new BMW than acknowledge he was drowning in debt. Francine would bring her latest painting, propping it against the wall during dinner so we could all admire it. "This one's going to be in the gallery showing next month," she'd announce, though the gallery showing never seemed to materialize. Her credit card debt was an open secret, the kind everyone knew about, but nobody discussed directly. Mom would fuss over everyone, filling plates whether you were hungry or not. "Dexter, you're too thin," she'd say, piling more food on my plate while simultaneously asking Preston about his latest commission and praising Francine's artistic vision. But lately, she'd been distracted, checking her phone constantly, her fingers twitching like she was dealing invisible cards. Dad would sit at the head of the table, eating quietly, occasionally asking me about the shop or Hazel about school. He was a man of few words but deep observations. "Your mother's worried about money," he'd told me privately a month before. "But she won't say why." The life insurance conversation had started 6 months earlier. Mom brought it up at Sunday dinner, between the pot roast and the apple pie. "Dexter, you need to think about Hazel's future. What if something happens to you?" "I'm 35, Mom. Nothing's going to happen." "Your grandfather was healthy too, until he wasn't," she pressed. "Life insurance is just responsible parenting." Preston had jumped in, suddenly interested in the conversation. "She's right, Dex. I know a guy. Great rates. You could get $500,000 for practically nothing at your age." Even Francine had chimed in. It would give you peace of mind. So I'd done it. $500,000, with Hazel as the beneficiary and my parents as trustees until she turned 18. The insurance agent, Preston's friend, had seemed almost too eager to write the policy. "You're young, healthy, this is easy money," he'd said, not realizing his choice of words would later feel like a curse. I woke up 3 days later to voices, but my body wouldn't respond. The machines beeping around me sounded distant, underwater. I tried to open my eyes, move my fingers, anything. Nothing worked. The paralysis was complete, like being buried in concrete while still breathing, but I could hear everything with crystal clarity, every word cutting through the medical equipment's rhythm like a knife through silk. "The doctors say it's touch and go." Preston's voice came from my left. He was using his real estate voice, the one he used when discussing property values, not his brother lying, possibly dying, in a hospital bed. "We need to discuss practical matters while we're all here." "Preston, that's ghoulish," Francine said, but her voice lacked any real conviction. I heard her chair scrape closer to the bed. "He's our brother." "I'm being realistic. Someone has to be. Dexter has a substantial life insurance policy, $500,000. If he doesn't make it, we need to ensure Hazel is taken care of properly. That means making smart decisions now, not emotional ones later." My mother's voice joined in from somewhere near the window. "The girl's mother is a nurse. She makes good money. She can provide for Hazel just fine. But who's going to maintain the family property? The shop? Your father can't run it, not with his back." "Preston's right. We need to think practically about the estate." "The boy's not dead yet, Dorothy." My father's voice cut through, rare and sharp. "Vernon, you heard what the doctor said. Massive heart damage. Even if he wakes up, he'll never work again. He'll be an invalid. The shop will need to be sold anyway. The insurance money could set us all up properly. Set Hazel up properly. College fund, trust fund, whatever's best." I wanted to scream. My daughter's college was already covered. I'd been saving since she was born, $50 here, $100 there. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. They knew this. We'd talked about it last Christmas when Francine was complaining about student loans. Then I heard Preston lean close to someone, footsteps suggesting it was the doctor. His voice dropped to what he thought was a whisper, but in the quiet ICU room, I heard every syllable. "He's going to die anyway, isn't he? The EEG shows minimal activity. This is just prolonging the inevitable. Why put the family through this? Why put Hazel through this?" Dr. Rothschild's voice was stiff, professional, and clearly disgusted. "Mr. Calloway is stable. His brain activity, while reduced, is present. We don't discontinue care based on family speculation about outcomes." "But the insurance company needs to know about his condition," Preston pressed. "They'll need documentation, timelines, prognosis reports." "The insurance company will receive appropriate documentation if and when it becomes necessary. Now, I have other patients to attend to." The doctor's footsteps faded, but my family stayed. For the next 2 days, I lay there listening to them plan my death like a business merger. Francine Googled my insurance policy details on her phone, reading clauses aloud. "It says here that in case of permanent disability, the payout is only 60%, but if he dies, it's the full amount." "That's a $200,000 difference," Preston calculated quickly. "That changes everything." Mom had started making lists, her pen scratching against paper. "His tools in the shop are worth at least $30,000. The diagnostic equipment another $20,000. The property itself, in this market, Preston, what do you think? Commercial property on Maple Street? With the gentrification happening? We're looking at maybe $400,000, maybe more, if we hold out for the right buyer." "Do you think Hazel really needs his tools?" Mom asked. "She's 8, they're worth good money. We could sell them and put the money in her trust. Or pay off some debts first," Francine suggested quietly. To ensure we can properly care for her without financial stress." My father's voice came rarely, but when it did, it was firm. "You're all vultures, the boy is right there." "Dad, we're being practical," Preston shot back. Someone has to be. You've always been too soft. Sometimes I felt my father's calloused hand on mine, rough from years of working with pipes and wrenches. He'd squeeze gently and whisper, "Fight, son. Don't listen to them. Just fight." Bethany came twice a day with Hazel. She'd hold my other hand, the one without the IV, and talk about normal things. Mrs. Henderson keeps calling about her Buick. She says you're the only one who knows how to fix it right. The transmission's been acting up for months, and she trusted you to fix it. Hazel's small voice broke through everything else. "Daddy, I got an A on my science test, the one about the heart. I knew all the parts because you showed me on the engine how things pump and flow. The teacher said I was very smart, just like my dad. Please, wake up. I want to tell you about it properly." But my family kept planning, calculating, dividing up my life while my heart struggled to keep beating. On the 5th day, I fought through what felt like thick molasses and finally opened my eyes. The fluorescent lights stabbed into my brain like needles, but I forced myself to focus. The room erupted in chaos. Preston actually stepped backward, his face shifting from shock to something that looked distinctly like disappointment. Francine dropped her phone, the screen shattering on the hospital floor. Mom clutched her chest dramatically, as if she was the one having the medical emergency. "Dexter!" Bethany rushed to my bedside, grabbing my hand. Hazel was right behind her, her small face lighting up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" She climbed onto the bed despite the nurse's protests, wrapping her thin arms around me carefully, as if she knew exactly where it hurt. My throat felt like sandpaper, but I forced the words out, each one deliberate and clear. I heard everything. The room went silent. Preston's face drained of color, his salesman's smile freezing into something grotesque. Mom suddenly became very interested in the floor tiles, her hands wringing the purse strap she always carried. Francine started to speak, stopped, then started again, producing nothing but small, strangled sounds. Every single word. "You were in a coma," Preston said quickly, his voice climbing an octave. "The doctors said you wouldn't be aware of anything. The doctors were wrong." I looked at each of them in turn, my gaze settling longest on my mother. $500,000. That's what I'm worth to you? Actually, no, 500,000 plus the shop, plus the tools, plus whatever else you could carve up and sell. Dad stood from his chair in the corner, the first time I'd seen him stand up to Mom in years. "I told you he could hear us. I told you to shut your mouths." "Vernon, we were just discussing practical matters," Mom started, but Dad cut her off. "You were dividing up his things while he was fighting for his life. I've been married to you for 40 years, Dorothy, and I've never been more disgusted." Recovery was slow and brutal. 6 weeks of physical therapy, learning to walk again, building strength in muscles that had forgotten their purpose. The shop stayed closed. Mrs. Henderson's Buick sat waiting under a tarp, but something else gnawed at me beyond my family's greed. This shouldn't have happened. I was too young, too healthy, too careful with my body for a massive heart attack. "Your arteries were clear," Dr. Rothschild said during a follow-up appointment, showing me the cardiac catheterization results. "Your cholesterol levels are perfect. No family history of early cardiac events, no smoking, minimal drinking, regular exercise. Dexter, men like you don't have heart attacks at 35. So, what happened? Sometimes we don't get answers. The human body can be unpredictable. Doc, I'm a mechanic. When something breaks that shouldn't, there's always a reason. A contaminated fluid, a faulty part, something. Bodies are just biological machines, right?" He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "What are you suggesting?" "Run more tests. Blood work, toxicology, everything. Please. Something about this feels wrong, and it's not just my family circling like vultures." He agreed, ordering comprehensive blood work and expanded toxicology panels. "We'll check everything, but don't get your hopes up for answers. Sometimes these things just happen, even when they shouldn't." Meanwhile, I watched my family with new eyes. Preston had been struggling with his real estate business more than he let on. I had a friend run a credit check, found out he was 3 months behind on his BMW lease, 6 months behind on his condo. The successful businessman image was all smoke and mirrors. Francine's situation was worse. $30,000 in credit card debt, her studio apartment in pre-eviction proceedings. She'd been selling her paintings all right, but for $50 on street corners, not thousands in galleries. The artist's life she portrayed was pure fiction. Mom's gambling problem had escalated. Dad showed me bank statements he'd found hidden in her jewelry box. $20,000 drained from their retirement account. Online poker, sports betting, even virtual slot machines. She'd been chasing losses for 2 years. Then there was the morning I collapsed. Someone had been in my shop. The security camera had mysteriously stopped working the night before, the cable cut clean through with wire cutters. My coffee mug, which I'd drunk from just before the heart attack, had been washed and put away by the time the crime scene photos were taken. I never washed dishes at the shop. That mug should have been sitting dirty on my workbench. "Who has keys to the shop?" Detective Hawthorne asked when I finally convinced someone to investigate. "Just family," I admitted. "Preston, my parents, and I'd given Francine one in case of emergencies." The detective made notes, her face carefully neutral. "And they all knew your routine, when you'd be there alone?" "Everyone knew. I opened at 6 every morning, had for years. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Someone in my family had tried to kill me for money. The question was who, and whether they'd try again. 2 months after my heart attack, Dr. Rothschild called. His voice was different this time, urgent and controlled, like he was holding back something explosive. "Dexter, we need to talk. Can you come to my office today, not tomorrow, today?" I sat across from him an hour later as he spread lab results across his desk, his fingers pointing to specific values highlighted in yellow. "Your blood work shows traces of ethylene glycol. That's antifreeze, Dexter. But more concerning, we found traces of digitoxin, a cardiac glycoside that hasn't been prescribed in the United States for over a decade. It causes heart attacks by disrupting the electrical signals in your heart." My world tilted sideways. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. Someone poisoned me? The levels suggest a deliberate dose, carefully measured. Too much would have been immediately obvious. Too little wouldn't have worked. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. "Dexter, someone with knowledge of chemicals and access to your daily routine, tried to kill you. I've already contacted the police." Detective Rita Hawthorne took over the case with the intensity of someone who'd seen too much family violence. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We reviewed everything. Who had access to the shop? Who knew my routines? Who would benefit from my death? The suspect list was heartbreakingly short. It had to be family. The investigation revealed things that made my stomach turn. Preston had been to the shop the night before my heart attack, supposedly checking on inventory for insurance purposes, but the inventory had been updated just a week prior. There was no reason for him to be there. The security camera cable had been cut with tools from inside the shop, not outside, meaning whoever did it had a key. Francine's credit card had been used at a garden center that sold antifreeze the week before my heart attack. When questioned, she claimed it was for her car, but her ancient Honda had been in the shop for months. She hadn't driven it since spring. Mom's computer history was the most damning. She'd researched digitoxin extensively, visiting medical websites, reading about dosages and effects. She'd cleared her browser history, but not well enough. The tech specialist found everything in the cache files. She'd even searched how long before a heart attack death certificate is issued, and life insurance payout timeline. "It could be any of them," Detective Hawthorne said, showing me the evidence, "or all of them working together. But without more proof, we can't make an arrest." That's when I decided to set a trap. At Sunday dinner, with everyone gathered around the table, I made an announcement. I've been doing a lot of thinking since the heart attack, about family, about priorities, about what really matters. Everyone leaned in, Preston putting down his phone for the first time all evening. I'm changing my life insurance beneficiary. Everything's going to cancer research. The American Heart Association specifically, they saved my life. It's only right they get something back. The reactions were immediate and visceral. Preston's fork clattered onto his plate, sending gravy splashing across Mom's white tablecloth. Francine went pale, her hand shaking so badly she had to put down her wine glass. Mom started to object, then caught herself, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "When?" Preston asked, trying to sound casual but his voice cracking on the single word. "Tomorrow morning. Already have the appointment scheduled for 8 o'clock. "That seems hasty," Mom said carefully. "What about Hazel?" "Hazel will get a trust fund from my savings. She doesn't need blood money." The phrase hung in the air like an accusation. Dad looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. He gave me the slightest nod. That night, my new security system, the one I hadn't told anyone about, caught everything in pristine high definition. Preston breaking into the shop at 2 in the morning, going straight to my office, to the coffee maker I used every morning. In his hand, a small vial. He poured it into the coffee grounds, stirred them carefully, then reset the machine. Professional, practiced, like he'd done it before. The police were waiting when he tried to leave. Preston, faced with video evidence, broke down completely. But his confession shocked everyone, including the detectives. "It wasn't supposed to be just me," he shouted as they cuffed him, spit flying from his mouth. "This was Mom's idea from the start. She researched the drugs, found out what would work. Francine bought the antifreeze, said she was fixing her car. We were all supposed to split it 3 ways after paying off our debts. For Hazel's future, we said, but really?" He looked at our mother with pure disgust. "You just wanted to pay off your gambling debts, didn't you, Mom? 40,000 to your bookie? That's what your son's life was worth?" Mom's face crumpled like paper in rain. Francine started sobbing, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her entire body. "We never meant for it to really happen," Francine wailed. "It was just talk, just frustrated talk about money and how unfair it was that Dexter had everything together while we were drowning." "Talk doesn't put poison in coffee," Detective Hawthorne said quietly, signaling for additional officers to arrest them all. Preston got 15 years for attempted murder. The judge called it one of the most callous cases of family betrayal he'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Mom and Francine received lesser sentences for conspiracy, 3 years each with most of it suspended to probation. They had to wear ankle monitors and attend mandatory counseling about gambling addiction and financial crimes. The family I'd known my entire life shattered like a windshield hit by a stone, spiderweb cracks spreading until nothing remained but sharp fragments. But from those cracks, something unexpected grew, something stronger. Dad moved in above the shop with me the day after the trial ended. He brought 2 suitcases and his toolbox, nothing else. "I should have left her years ago," he said, setting his things down in the spare room. "I saw the signs, the greed growing like cancer. But I was a coward, stayed quiet to keep the peace. Never again, son. Never again." For the first time in my life, we really talked. Not just surface conversation about work or weather, but real communication. We'd work on cars together during the day, and at night, over beer and takeout, he'd tell me stories about my grandfather I'd never heard. "Your grandfather always said that real family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the engine won't start and it's 20 below." He was right, I said, thinking about who had actually been there when I needed them. Bethany and I didn't remarry, but we became better friends than we'd ever been as spouses. She'd saved my life by insisting the doctors run those additional tests when everyone else was ready to accept, "Sometimes these things just happen," as an answer. "I knew you," she said one evening when she dropped Hazel off. 35-year-old health nuts who run 3 miles before breakfast don't just have random heart attacks. Something was wrong, and I wasn't going to let them ignore it. We developed a new rhythm. Sunday dinners at my place now, with Dad cooking his famous chili, Bethany bringing dessert, and Hazel setting the table with intense concentration. These dinners had laughter, genuine warmth, and absolutely no talk about money or insurance policies. Hazel was the real hero of this story. At 8 years old, she showed more wisdom than all the adults around her combined. The day after the arrests, she found me sitting in the shop, staring at nothing, trying to process how my own mother had tried to kill me for money. "Daddy," she said, climbing into my lap like she had when she was smaller. "Uncle Preston and Aunt Francine and Grandma made a bad choice because they forgot something important." "What's that, sweetheart?" "That people are worth more than paper with numbers on it. You taught me that when you fixed Mrs. Chen's car for free because her husband was sick. You said helping people matters more than money. You remember that?" "I remember everything you teach me, Dad. The important stuff anyway." I kept the life insurance, but changed everything about it. Hazel was still the beneficiary, but with Bethany and Dad as trustees. I also added a clause that in the event of my suspicious death, the money would go entirely to charity until a thorough investigation cleared all family members. My lawyer called it the anti-murder clause, and we both laughed, but it wasn't really funny. The shop thrived after I reopened. Mrs. Henderson's Buick ran better than it had in years, and she told everyone in town how I'd kept my promise to fix it even after nearly dying. Business doubled within 6 months. People wanted to support someone who'd survived what I had, who'd chosen forgiveness over hatred. Some nights, I still wake up at 3 in the morning, feeling phantom pressure on my chest. Not from poison this time, but from the memory of lying in that hospital bed, paralyzed, listening to my family plan around my death like vultures discussing a carcass. The heart attack didn't kill me, but it killed my naive belief that family meant unconditional love. Yet it also taught me something precious that I'll carry forever. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Preston, Mom, and Francine showed me they valued money over my life. But Dad, Bethany, and Hazel showed me that real love doesn't come with a price tag, insurance payout, or calculated benefit. The shop now has state-of-the-art security, cameras covering every angle, and I never leave my coffee unattended. Trust, once broken by poison, never fully heals. But sometimes from that broken trust, you build something stronger. A life surrounded only by those who'd save you, not sell you. My heart still beats, scarred but strong. Every morning when I drop Hazel at school and she calls back, "Love you, Dad," I know exactly what's worth living for. The doctors called my survival a miracle. I call it a second chance to recognize the difference between relatives and family. They're not always the same thing, and sometimes it takes almost dying to truly start living. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the people in your own life and what really matters, please hit that like button and share this video. Drop a comment below about what family means to you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Thank you for watching. And remember, the most valuable thing in your life isn't in your bank account. It's in the people who'd rather save you than profit from your loss.